Oh man, it is a good week for gaming news. Not only do we have the decade-long awaited GTA 6 actual trailer, but also on the other side of things, maybe a little less mentioned, yes, Fallout is getting a TV series as well. Yes, hopping on the trend of video game adaptations since Detective Pikachu did it well, and Super Mario Bros. Movie did good in animation, and The Last of Us, of course, probably being one of the bigger influences, Bethesda, of course, have taken a piece of that pie and created themselves a Fallout movie. Official, canon, and made with Amazon Prime. Now, admittedly, the Fallout world is probably one of my personal favorites in all of video games. I'm not always the most happy with how it's managed by Bethesda and all sorts of gaming glitches and the outdated elements of the engine's working, yada yada, whatever, but the story, the actual world building behind this franchise is some of the best stuff. And so though I'd usually roll my eyes at an acclaimed Todd Howard, he can make some pretty good tales when he's in charge. Now, this came as an absolute surprise to me, to be honest. I've seen all sorts of Fallout fan trailers over the years, but this stuff is legitimate. And we have all sorts of details to go over. Now, this trailer was released on Saturday because it was shown at a panel at CCXP in Sao Paulo in Brazil. Now, CCXP was originally called the Comic-Con Experience. It's Comic-Con in Brazil. And alongside this trailer dropped was a full-on panel with the director and a whole bunch of the cast. So let's go through some of the cast and characters that we have to see. Right up front and center as your standard main character protagonist, you have Lucy, played by Ella Purnell, known previously for the likes of Yellow Jackets, the voice of Jinx in Arcane, Army of the Dead, and for me, it's Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children. Oh, that's a bit of a deep cut. But yes, she is to be your standard protagonist you would expect out of the games. She is a vault dweller, smothered by her underground dwellings in Vault 33, which is set in what was once Santa Monica in Los Angeles. So though in the past we've had Fallout New Vegas in Vegas and Fallout 4 in Boston, now we're in Los Angeles, located next to the Santa Monica Pier. Now, as a relative fan of the games, I can help fill in some gaps if you're not familiar with the franchise itself. Generally, with these vaults, these are all social experiments that have gone horrendously wrong, and Vault 33, we've never heard of before. There is a long, extensive list of vaults in the past in games that you see or just hear about. Vault 33 isn't one of them, it's just a gap. But now with this series obviously coming to fruition, apparently on Fallout 76, you can get a free Vault 33 jumpsuit. Now, as Lucy is the pretty standard startup and obviously living from beneath the ground, she's going to be our innocent everyman, unaware of the world so that as it unfolds in front of her, it'll unfold in front of us, the audience. Relatively soft compared to all the other characters on the surface, but of course, willing to take on her own battles herself. We see already some sort of conflict within the vault that leads her to leave in the first place. Alongside Lucy, what we do know of the characters around her are that her father is the overseer of the vault. Every vault has an overseer who is in charge, being played by Kyle MacLachlan as Vault Overseer Hank. He's the guy who spits inside his coffee. Presumably, Lucy wants to leave, he's not a big fan, everything goes wrong, and then she leaves anybody. And I guess Hank will probably stay dead. Or plot twist, he's the villain of the whole thing, I don't know. Lucy also has an inquisitive brother, played by Rico from Hannah Montana. I'm sure he hates that that's his reference for his casting, but it's what everyone wants to say. It's all I keep finding in my research. Though Moises has done other things like The King of Staten Island and Ender's Game, thought I'd point that out. Whilst Kyle MacLachlan is the main character in the 1984 Dune, as well as is in Twin Peaks and Futurama. Now, though a lot of this is inferred from the trailer, a lot of the research I can find for this movie all come from one singular article by Vanity Fair, as they have a massive cargo of information with their exclusive sneak peeks and information. Other things they share with us is the fact that there is another leader of some sort being played by Sunita Chowdhury, but all I can really find is that she's there. Other cast names that have popped up but don't necessarily have a role include the likes of Leslie Uggams, Francis Turner, Zach Cherry, Johnny Pemberton, Rodrigo Luzzi, Annabelle O'Hagan, and Zelia Mendez-Jones. All of these people are involved to some capacity, but I don't necessarily have a character to attach them to right now. But that doesn't mean we don't know any of the damn characters. There are a whole bunch of other factors going on here, because though I've talked about the classic starter with your Vault Dweller, Lucy is only a tiny piece of the puzzle. Because you see, what's really interesting about the way this story is approaching itself is the fact that there are three main characters. There are three perspectives of this world that we're going to be shown this universe unfolding with through the lenses of. One of them is Lucy the Vault Dweller, but the second one we're going to talk about is the guy in the power armor. It's the character of Maximus, played by Aaron Moten. And this guy is the representative of the Brotherhood of Steel in the Fallout universe. Now, the Brotherhood of Steel are kind of like a militant group with their own set of ideals that go patrolling the universe. And they're very much the iconography of the games when practically every game cover is the big power suit. Now, this guy's not brought up in the vaults, he's built on the surface and very much built for defense and offense. Now, some of Aaron's previous works include Emancipation, Father Stew, and Disjointed. But in this Fallout series, he's been described in his role as a member of the Brotherhood of Steel as being a little bit of the Marine Corps, a little bit of the Knights Templar. It's this weird kind of fusion. In the absence of a federal government, you just had all this military hardware lying around. Who would get it and how would they maintain control of it? The answer is the Brotherhood, a community fueled by a mutated version of patriotism, religion, loyalty, and fraternity. It's just another one of the factions that engulfs the world of Fallout, with Maximus's character being more of a cynical one, acting out just in order to survive, since he knows exactly how this world works, unlike Lucy. He's a squire. This is drawing on the classic Arthurian knight legends where life was cheap and you had a squire as long as you were useful. They had to prove their worth, they had to prove their valor and their strength, and if they didn't, they were kind of cast aside. These quotes come from the main director of this movie, Jonah Nolan, who in itself has his own sort of backstories attached to this movie. See, Jonah Nolan is the brother to Christopher Nolan, and is very much the kind of person that would take on this kind of sci-fi project. In fact, it's to the point that when this movie was being pitched about, some unknown exec producer said, "I'm not going to accept this until I learn that Jonah Nolan isn't working on it." And with the creators at Bethesda being very inspired by all sorts of sci-fi productions to build Fallout and the new Starfield, such as Interstellar, the work of a Nolan seemed like a bit of a no-brainer. In fact, pulling back time a little bit into the development of this movie, you'd think the idea of a Bethesda production would have come way earlier on in time, but it turns out Todd Howard himself was a lot more hesitant about the idea. And yes, he is involved with this series. I keep calling it a movie, I'm so sorry. With Todd telling Vanity Fair, "I've taken countless meetings with producers or heard pitches and nothing ever felt like the right fit." Or maybe I was wondering a little, how will it affect the franchise? I took a very cautious approach. And the thing that finally made Todd Howard bite is not only the fact that I imagine video game adaptations as finally being done well, it's not exactly 2009 or anything, but also one of the main, also interesting integral points to this whole series, it is not actually an adaptation of a Fallout story. It's not Fallout 3 again. Lucy's father's probably not going to be the ultimate villain from Fallout 4 or trying to make clean water in Fallout 3. It is an entirely original tale told in the world of Fallout, and more so than that, it's built in such a way that it can stay canonical to the story, only adding to the franchise rather than taking away. With Todd saying, "I did not want to do an interpretation of an existing story we did." That was the other thing. A lot of pitches were, this is the movie of Fallout 3. And I was like, yeah, we told that story. I don't have a lot of interest seeing those translated. I was interested in someone telling a unique Fallout story. Treat it like a game. It gives the creators of the series their own playground to play in. And to be fair, I personally think that's probably the best direction to take. The very medium of video games allows the story to unfold in a far more satisfying way. Not only are you interacting with the story to experience it yourself in a form of immersion, but also there are so many more details you can dig out when you're sinking hundreds of hours into it rather than 2. Now you can head through some abandoned little house and read the books that are on the shelves. Look in far more detail on the set designs and how other characters and tiny NPCs have opinions on the most mundane and random of things for the sake of world building. A movie or a TV series is far less impactful for that vibe if it's a tale that's already been done and expanded to a far better degree. But the collaboration between Todd Howard and Jonah Nolan just seemed like the perfect fit. With Todd again saying, "The movies he's worked on are some of my favorites, and I'd heard that he liked video games and had an eye for that stuff." And honestly, to me, that just sounds really wholesome. A fan of Interstellar now gets to work with the co-writer to Interstellar, since that was the role of Jonah Nolan. Jonah is also the creator behind Westworld and the writer for The Dark Knight, so this guy is absolutely a major player in these kind of things. And Memento as well. So now it's being helmed by Kilter Films production company, who is Jonah Nolan and his wife Lisa Joy. You've then also got co-showrunners Geneva Robertson Dworet, who is the co-writer to Captain Marvel, as well as Graham Wagner, previously known for The Office, Portlandia, and Silicon Valley. Anyway, looping back to the main plot now that you know some of the background production details of this movie, the third main character in our tale is probably going to be one of my favorites, and that is the role of the ghoul. We've got the iconic protagonist Vault Dweller, the iconic power suit cover art guy, and then you have one of the more interesting creatures of the universe. Forget super mutants or that cartoon Vault Boy. Ghouls are a very interesting creature because their backstory is the idea that they were actually humans too once. Burned and deteriorated by the extent of radiation from the nuclear war that created this whole apocalyptic world, now they're out with no noses and horrible skin, angry and cynical and jealous of the smooth skins that normal humans have, and a beautiful main character to bring us a whole nother perspective of this world. Not innocent, not militant, just off their rocker. Now, the ghoul is played by Walton Goggins, previously known for Django Unchained and The Hateful Eight, which fits very fittingly to their cowboy aesthetic. But what's really interesting is not only are they going to be a very powerful, strange, anti-hero kind of character, but because they were once a human, they're going to introduce us to flashbacks to before the world went boom. As his human name is Cooper Howard. Again, riding horseback and apparently having a family, it will show us the earliest point in the timeline to really just expel all the best corners of the Fallout world in a brilliant series that just unveils everything exactly how I'd want. We see the before moments as if we were alive back then, like the protagonist from Fallout 4. We see the coming out of the vault for the very first time, unaware of the world, like Fallout 3. And we've got the militant guy who just knows what's going on in this world, this time without the amnesia from Fallout New Vegas. For an adaptation that's meant to showcase this world to a new audience, I really think this is nailing it to a T, from what I have seen from this singular trailer. Plus, my biggest complaint about the Fallout world is always the glitches and the mechanics of the games. The story and the world building is immaculate to me. But yes, anyway, the ghoul specifically is described as having a ruthless streak, but a code of honor. Very cool. And for descriptions of the ghoul character, director Jonah Nolan would go on to say, there is a chasm in time and distance between who this guy was and who he's become, which for me creates an enormous dramatic question. What happened to this guy? So we'll walk backwards into that, which is just brilliant storytelling, to be honest. He is who I'm most anticipating the story of and who I would like to learn about the most. So I'm glad they hooked onto that properly rather than, I don't know, some random other creature they could have delved into. With this ghoul being a lot more intelligent and stable compared to a lot of the normal ghouls that are just kind of zombies in the games. He becomes our guide and our protagonist in that older world, even as we understand him to be the antagonist at the end of the world. Ooh. Now, I don't know if that means he's actually the full-on villain. I see him more as some sort of anti-hero guy that you gotta kind of be rooting for. But then again, I could be wrong. I guess we'll find out. I'm hooked on the idea, to be honest. There is also notes of a character played by Michael Emerson, previously known for Lost, Saw, and Batman The Dark Knight Returns, who plays some sort of researcher named Wilzig, who's the guy speaking at the fire, and he knows how the world works. Now, though I said earlier that the cartoon Vault Boy iconography might not make an appearance, actually it turns out he will, in some form. Supposedly even getting an origin story in the series, which is very interesting. With Todd saying that was something that they came up with that's just really smart, which I'll believe it when I see it, to be honest. That one makes me a little bit intrigued and cautious, but alright. And as I said, this series is canon, but to the point where Bethesda quality checked the scripts so that they could coexist with the plot lines of the games, which is just really cool. It's always good when stuff like that works out and it all lines in together. Again, man, this adaptation really intrigues me. So with the nuclear war that destroys the Earth, or at least the US, taking place in 2077, and us flash forwarding to 219 years later, the official year that this series takes place is 2296. So I'd be 300 years on the dot. That sets it to a point in the timeline beyond all of the major games. Fallout 3, New Vegas, Fallout 4, and all the other ones, I'm sure. I'm a half fake fan of Fallout, like most people. But of course, this means that all sorts of references can appear to all the old games, which of course we will lap right up. I know I will. Now, alongside this footage from the trailer, we also have 4 major posters and all sorts of other preview screenshots from the movie, thanks to Vanity Fair, showcasing all sorts of versions of the Fallout doorways and the different characters involved. With this one particular junk town looking like Megaton to me from Fallout 3, this is supposedly known as Philly, from the remains of Greater Los Angeles. I love it. and an ominous hint to what's going on down in the Vault Dweller arc, since those pair of legs are from a dead body, presumably. Even in the trailer, they look pretty dead. Now, though this series was only actually announced a couple months back, so this is a real quick turnaround on everything, this series is set to release in just 4 months on April 12th, 2024 on Amazon Prime Video. Likely hoping to have the similar kind of success as the Last of Us series on HBO. Now, that had a super success of 8.2 million people tuning in for the finale. I'll be very curious to see how Fallout does as the same. Everything I've heard so far has practically been perfect for what I'd want for an adaptation of the Fallout saga, so I'll end you off on a bunch of quotes left over from the marketing stage of this development, both from the director Jonah Nolan, who actually only directed the first 3 episodes, so maybe this is a hint overblown, but it makes sense since we're going to the introductory parts of the characters, as well as some quotes from Todd Howard himself. The games are about the culture of division and haves and have-nots that unfortunately have only gotten more and more acute in this country and around the world over the last decades. We get to talk about that in a wonderful, speculative fiction way. I think we're all looking at the world and going, God, things seem to be heading in a very, very frightening direction. Okay, great. Sounds like there's going to be some political commentary in a maybe tongue-in-cheek way on this series. Sure. So many of us have such naive ideas, even now, about everyone else's experiences, and it's one of the things I love about America. It's this giant, manic collection of different experiences, different points of views. And to be fair, yeah, considering Fallout is a little bit of a political commentary on a lot of American things, it would make sense for it to fit right into this series. Let's just hope that it's still a escapist, fictional fun romp, rather than a ominous, futuristic prediction. With Todd saying, "We had a lot of conversations over the style of humor, the level of violence, the style of violence." Look, Fallout can be very dramatic and dark and post-apocalyptic, but you need to weave in a little bit of a wink. I think they threaded that needle really well on the TV show. And Jonah saying, "It's a dark world in many ways, but the games were fun to play, fun to explore, and I think that was a mandate for us, to make sure that it was enjoyable to spend time in this universe." Well, hopefully, with all of these butting heads and tick boxes coming together, they nail it in every direction in all the best ways. I actually have pretty good hype for this saga. This might be one of the things I'm most looking forward to next year. If they nail it, they could really nail it. But I guess we'll just have to go ahead and see. Was this news known? Was this a trending trailer that I just completely missed because I was away briefly over the weekend? Do people care? Maybe it got lost under the weight of the GTA 6 trailer. To be fair, I'm excited about that too. I could mention all sorts of stuff about that too, but this is not a gaming channel anymore. It's a movie one, as much as I just rambled about video games for a good chunk there. Either way, I'm gonna end it off finally right there. For now, my name's been Daz, you didn't really care, and I'll see you in a little bit.